Okay, so we're gonna begin. So, hello, welcome. So, my name is Dr. Joshua Black, and I work for the BC Center for Palliative Care as the Bereavement Initiative Manager. I've had the pleasure to lead all the center's bereavement studies since 2021, and in my spare time, I also host the Grief Dreams podcast. And here with me today is my colleague Jacqueline, who'll be running the Zoom for us and provide any kind of technical support if you shall need it. Next slide.
Okay.
So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which the BC Center for Palliative Care is located on is the unceded shared traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, in what is colonially known as New Westminster in British Columbia, Canada. And I'm personally joining from the unceded Stalo territory in a town colonially known as Abbotsford in British Columbia, Canada. And we recognize that all of you joining online are participating from traditional territories of other Indigenous peoples from coast to coast to coast. We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples that call this land home. Next slide. So this is the second BC Center for Palliative Care Echo session on our series on grief and bereavement literacy, which we are doing each month on a different topic, with next month's topic on children's grief. And so the need to increase grief and bereavement knowledge really came from different research studies that we have done with the bereaved and also bereavement service providers, with one study being a province-wide roundtable with knowledge users in British Columbia that really aimed to identify priority actions to address the needs of bereaved people and recommend strategies to improve bereavement support. And so that action plan report should be available next month. And so today we're going to be using the Echo platform as it creates a knowledge sharing network to share and experience and learning. So today's session, we'll have a presentation, we'll have some discussion, and also a question and answer period. So while we strive to create a safe environment in every Echo session, we recognize that the nature of this session touches on both personal and emotional subjects for many. So if you do not feel comfortable sharing your name or image during the session, feel free to turn off your camera or delete your name or even just change your name. So we want to let you know that also these sessions are going to be recorded, and the recordings will be edited a bit. Alongside, we'll be also providing those recordings to people who couldn't attend today, and it will also be on YouTube. So along with the recordings, you'll also be provided with summary notes that capture any kind of discussion and any kind of resources shared during this session. Next slide. So today's second session on grief and bereavement literacy is titled Grieving the Death of a Pet. And so I want to introduce you to our presenters. So the educational presentation today will be presented by Jennifer Dacre, and she is a Palliative and Bereavement Services Manager at Chilliwack Hospice Society. And additionally, we will have people with lived experience being able to share, and be Elizabeth, Hector, and Pam, and hopefully Andrew will be able to attend also. So today's session will have a 15-minute presentation by Jennifer, followed by a question and answer period by you, and then be 15-minute discussion with people with lived experience, followed by a question and answer period. So if you have questions, feel free to start thinking about those as they are speaking. And so now it is my pleasure to hand over the session to Jennifer.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Joshua. I'm going to request before I get going if you could sort of give me a time frame when I'm hitting my max, if I hit my max time, because I don't have a clock in front of me.
Okay.
So yes, my name is Jennifer Dacre, and this first slide here, I've got pictures of my two pets that were the ones who really introduced me to the fact of grieving a pet, my cat Buddy and my dog Bailey. So continuing on, I just want to acknowledge that I am privileged to learn, live, work, and play on the Stalo unceded territory, ancestral territories of the Palalt and Chilliwack people. As the daughter of an immigrant, I think it is important to acknowledge the land that I am very thankful to call home, while recognizing that Indigenous Canadians were denied the same peace and human rights provided to my family. So getting started, what do pets bring to our lives? The obvious, easy one for most of us is unconditional love, companionship, entertainment, comfort. But they also give us protection, and they give us a purpose. We have All of us have different reasons for getting up in the morning, and sometimes our pets are what gets us up and out of bed. So we each approach pet ownership with a different perspective. For many people, and I'm guessing most of us who are joined today, pets are a part of the family. And studies will show that the presence of pets can help buffer the cardiovascular reactivity to stressors. So basically, our hearts are better. Our hearts deal better with the stressors of life because pets are there to help calm us down. And dogs can help reverse adverse psychological consequences of social isolation. I don't know about cats. I think that cats probably do exactly as good a job. This particular study only spoke to dogs. But our pets will help us. Our pets actually make us physically more healthy and enhance our well-being. What do pets also give us? They meet our rational needs in the form of companionship, and they help reduce our stress. Often when we're going through difficult times, whether it is a death, whether it's a stressful period of work, if it's significant life changes, moving, divorce, even marriage, these are stressful times. And having a pet in our lives, we feel like we've got a teammate, right? And a source of support in periods, particularly in periods of conflict, but also in periods of joy and happiness that can bring stress as well. That picture is my dog Marley enjoying her best life on a boat. And what else do pets give us? So some people will state that their pets are irreplaceable. In situations like this, where we have such a significant bond, the owner will describe the pet as more like a child or a direct family member. It's not to say that our pets will replace our kids, but they are like our kids. There's attachment theory that's been formulated by John Bowlby back in the 50s, noting that we develop these really significant bonds to people who provide us with a sense of security and safety. And further research has shown that the human and animal bonds will give us that same emotional attachment and sense of security. And as I said already, the physical and mental health benefits. So I already covered that. A lot of people will call them akin to their children and have those same bonds. So got my notes because I forget a lot. So what will make a pet death unique? The number one aspect that what makes a pet death different from a human death is that when we first acquire a pet, we are in essence acknowledging that we're probably going to outlive this animal. And so on some level, we are subconsciously, for most of us, acknowledging that we are ready, anticipating, maybe not ready, anticipating and will be addressing the death of this pet at some point. We go into this agreement knowing that this is going to happen. And so we can have a form of grief almost from the outset of our relationship with our pets. Most of us do not consciously think that way about our pets, but if you spend some time and okay, yeah, that's probably what I'm agreeing to. What else makes a pet death unique? A second aspect is that there's a potential for us as owners to have direct participation in the death of this animal. And what I mean by that is that as owners, we usually are involved in determining the timing, the date, the location when we have to put a pet down or euthanize them. Also, as owners, we're involved with incurring the costs of that association with taking care of these pets, up to including the time of death, the aftermath, and that's an unusual circumstance for many people. If they've never dealt with the death of a pet, they don't really think about this, right? And then finally, if a person owns several pets over the course of their lifetime, this is the type of loss that we go through repeatedly. We are experiencing this over and over. Yep, we do this with people too. And what you may have noticed through these first early slides is that a lot of this is just like when a person dies. The difference being is that when a person dies, that's a more acknowledged, socially acknowledged, publicly acknowledged death. Whereas for many of us, we get the, oh, it's just a dog, you know? So it's estimated that the death of a pet is one of the most common sources of stress that a family can experience, occurring almost 2 times more frequently than the stress associated with children leaving home. I've been forgetting to mention along, we've got some of these pictures. These are pictures of some of the pets from our staff here at Chilliwack Hospice Society. A couple of slides back, we had a Christmas photo, and that was Gina. And we've had Jimmy in here. He's very nicely posed in his Christmas tuxedo. And so what we have when we talk about a pet death is disenfranchised grief. It's where the relationship is not recognized, the loss is not recognized, and sometimes the griever is not recognized. And so our social norms will dictate our grieving behaviors. And so what we get from these norms are rules that tell us who is allowed to grieve, where, when, and how long you're allowed to grieve, and for whom. And so when we have these situations where the death of a pet is not recognized as a valid or legitimate grief, then we roll into the situation of disenfranchised grief. And so bereaved pet owners, as a result of disenfranchised grief, are often expected to resolve their grief quickly, and they might even be encouraged to replace the deceased pet right away. Just get another dog, you'll feel better. And these kinds of actions, what they do is they continue to invalidate the pet owner's grief. It tells us we need to stop grieving. If you've dealt with the death of a human being, you've often probably received the same kind of response and the same kind of, please stop grieving because I'm uncomfortable with your grief. And when we have this situation with a pet death, once again, it seems like it's even less socially accepted, even more likely that people are going to want to just shut it out and please get another pet. I don't want to talk about this. I'm really uncomfortable. Which then what does that do? That just sends us right back into this spiral of we're not allowed to grieve this pet, or feeling like we're not allowed to grieve. So we, just like people, pet owners need to grieve the death of a pet, because those who are unable to grieve a death or a significant loss are more likely to experience higher levels of anxiety, depression, and grief severity. And what I mean by grief severity is that it continues over a long period of time. It gets worse over a long period of time. And so there's an increased risk of developing more maladaptive coping behaviors, which can lead to harm for ourselves, for others, and an inability to find focus and to move forward in our life. So just like when we're dealing with a human death, grieving a pet death, it marks the time and the place where we are changed from who we used to be to who we have become. And it's a subtle change, but when you're living it, you feel it. So common grief experiences among bereaved pet owners are isolation, guilt, anger, and ambiguity. Isolation comes from this sense that I'm alone in this. People think it's weird that I'm grieving my dog, my cat, my bird, my horse. And so I don't want to talk about it. There's a sense of guilt. And the guilt will arise often when we've had a situation where we've had to make that decision about our pet being euthanized. And then we sort of wonder, oh, okay, did I make the right decision? Did I act too soon? What if they could have had another week or month. You know, sometimes then also there's guilt with, did I wait too long? Did I not want to make that decision and then cause them to suffer as a result? Anger. Anger is a common one when we're dealing with the death of a person we love, that this isn't fair. I didn't get enough time. This is such a good animal. This is such a good companion. This was the only person or the only being that really understood me. And ambiguity. And that goes to, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this, because people around me tell me that it's not that big a deal, or they're kind of giving off this messaging that it's not that big a deal. So, known supportive factors for our bereaved pet owners: validation. Just like when we're dealing with a human death, having someone look at you or give you that reassurance that this is hard. There's nothing I can do to make this feel better for you. And it's hard, and I understand. Social supports, being able to connect with other people, to share your grief experience, or not, to sit with people and not have to talk about it, but just know they get it, right? They get it, they understand. And that returns back to validation. Continuing bonds and memorialization. And so one of the tasks of our grieving is figuring out a way that we can maintain a bond with the deceased pet. And that's talking about them. That's having those pictures around and remembering them. Memorialization, doing something in honor of them, having some kind of ceremony or ritual, something that acknowledges that this pet is not with us in presence anymore, in a physical form anymore. For some people, religion and spirituality is a huge piece of their grief work. And then for others, relationships with other animals. And it's not to say that they're looking to replace the pet that has died. It's acknowledging that other animals can still bring joy into our lives, and acknowledging that there is room in our lives for grief and joy to coexist, that it is okay that we grieve deeply and still find joy and love and comfort from other animals in our lives. So the Pet Death Grief Support Group at the Chilliwack Hospice Society, the concept of the group revolves around the belief that all deaths are sacred and they need to be honored in whatever way makes sense to the grieving person. And so what we do at hospice societies is we work to normalize the conversations around dying and death, and to support all people who are grieving at whatever stage of their grief that they're experiencing. Forgot to forward the slide. And so this picture here is from our most recent Pet Death Grief Support Group earlier this year. And one of the ways that we facilitate the grieving is we talk about adaptive grief expression. So therapeutic crying, sharing our feelings and memories, expressive arts, complementary therapies, and that might include equine supports, energy work, or music. And in this picture here, what you can see people doing is we're making sand jars and using the different colors of sand. There was different little add-ins that we had, glitter, beads, different figurines. And part of what we encouraged those folks to do for that session was bring something that represented their animal. And if they wanted to, they could choose to embed it within the sand jar. And have that as their memorial piece. Several people opted for that and others didn't. It's such an individual thing. And so they created the sand jars. They had opportunity to talk about that process as they made the sand and what each different color represented and what other little add-ins represented. And then glued the lid shut, and they have that as a memorial piece to keep with them. And this is just another picture from the same night, different angle. And what we're doing while we're facilitating this process is we're learning about and sharing the commonalities of grief with other pet owners, validating an individual person's experiences, trying to reduce the feelings of stigma and shame and loneliness through this process. So there's no standardized processes in Western society or practices in Western society that will support a person who is grieving the death of a pet. So when we're not talking about the death of another pet, our pet, when we're not talking about our experiencing or witnessing the experiences of other people, what happens is the natural conclusion that we're the only ones who are dealing with this. We're the only ones who are feeling this way, and therefore there must be something wrong with us. So learning about sharing these commonalities, as I've got on this screen, it's validating. And this goes towards this piece of knowing that we can grieve. It is healthy to grieve. It is a natural process to grieve. And hopefully encouraging our participants to feel comfortable talking with people outside of the group and talking with more people outside in everyday life about what this experience was like for them and normalizing these conversations. So there's just a few of the sources that I used in this presentation. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing if that's okay. Josh, tell me if I'm wrong. Good. Okay. There we go.
Wow. That was, oh, am I on? Nope. Okay, yeah. That's on mute. Thank you so much for that educational presentation. I must say, I learned a lot. I got a little emotional because you just reflect and you have such a sincerity to what you're doing. I'm really happy that you and the hospice, Chilliwack Hospice, is doing something like this. So before we begin, I'm going to be asking some questions, but I would like to open it up for questions and comments from the audience if you have any after seeing that. So if you want to please raise your hand, or you can type the question in the chat, and we have some time so we can answer some of those. And also, as we were hosting this meeting, and it's not like a webinar, where actually it's a meeting, you'll see that you might have a lot of boxes on your screen of different people. And so what we ask you to do is you can actually change that to make it a speaker view. And to be able to do that in the top right-hand corner, you can actually switch to speaker. And so if you do that now, we appreciate that. And so one of the questions I do have, so if people can't get to your group, because these people are from probably all over Canada and maybe in the US, are there any like informational supports that you hand out in your group or that they can get more information on this topic that you may find useful?
Honestly, one of the best places that I have found to get information about grief in general is What's Your Grief? It's a website. They're on social media. Canadian Virtual Hospice is a wonderful resource as well. Pet specific, it's a bit hard to find. It's, the resources that I used for this presentation are actually from peer-reviewed journals. And so it's difficult to find pet death specific supports. We are noticing, though, one of my colleagues has found some wonderful kids books specifically about a pet death. And so I'm hoping that means that it's becoming a bit more mainstream. But two of the best resources I've ever found are whatsyourgrief.com and Canadian Virtual Hospice. If you honestly, Google is getting better and better. So yeah.
That's good. Thank you so much for letting people know. And also, I know like we're all learning about how to support and resources. So if there's anyone in the audience that has any resources on the topic, please put them in the chat. And what we'll do is pass those along in the meeting notes afterwards. So we can just say like support better and know what resources are actually out there. I believe a question came in. So these pet services that you run, can you speak more on the structure? Is it weekly, bi-weekly? And thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Our pet death grief group, we've had the privilege of offering it twice in the last few years. It is you have to register. It's 4 weeks, weekly for 2 hours. And what we've managed to do is we started with 3 participants and 3 staff members, and yeah, and we expanded the last group. I believe we had 6. So hoping to keep rolling. We're next scheduled to run the group in February next year, starting February 14th. And so the 4 Wednesday nights. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And now we have another question. Do you provide virtual support? Some of our palliative clients have lost pets but have difficulty with transportation.
Absolutely, we do. Yeah. And two of the guests today are folks that I had the privilege of meeting with online. So yeah.
Beautiful. That's great to hear. How can we donate to this cause?
To Chilliwack Hospice Society, you can make a donation online at our website, which is chilliwackhospice.org. Or if you're local, come on in so we can meet. It'd be great.
That's, that's great. And then another question. I'm wondering if your pet loss group is a drop-in, or I guess you have to register. Is there certain like a time, and what is the ideal number of participants you find for a group?
Mm. So no, it's not drop-in. It is the 4-week registered group. In between the groups, we always provide one-to-one supports for people as well, just like with our human death grief group. So you don't have to wait until the next group to contact us to get some support in coping with your pet's death or coming death. Ideal numbers, that's a kind of a tough question because we've only had the opportunity to run this program twice. I just say whoever needs to be there, right? And so if we have 3 people, we run this group. If we have 2 people, we run this group. If we have 20 people, we will run this group. And so, my job is to make this as comfortable a place as possible. But really, the people who are in this group are doing the work and supporting one another. And my goal is to be there to facilitate the conversation, and then let those who are living this to speak to that and to do their work and help each other. So yeah.
Excellent. And then I guess last question is, I'd like to hear more about therapeutic crying. Is it different than clients just crying in a session, or is there some kind of exercise to that?
There are exercises. I just say cry. Um, it's one of those things where we have this stigma with crying. When people start to cry, what do? We automatically apologize, and I'm so sorry, and and people shove the Kleenex at you, and I really try not to do that. I try to just let people cry, and yeah, and understanding that crying is a physical, emotional, mental, psychological release for us. It is one way of releasing this energy and these feelings. Some people are not criers, so that's okay. You don't have to cry to release these feelings. But we like to refer to it as therapeutic as opposed to just crying, because we have this idea that crying is weak or silly or embarrassing, right? So, and for some people, it's they will do kind of exercises to make themselves cry and that kind of thing, but I say just cry.
That's great. Oh, one last question. It's a quick one. Can people outside of Chilliwack join the group?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's we haven't been able to, well, we've only run it twice, and we haven't done a hybrid group with in-person as well as on Zoom attendees. That's something we're definitely willing to explore. It would just depend on how many folks wanted to join on Zoom. I've also done, through COVID, we did grief groups 100% on Zoom. And so that could be something that's open for for our exploration as well.
That's amazing. So that'll be the end of questions. I know if people have more questions, where can they send them to?
You could email me, Jennifer@chilliwackhospice.org. O-R-G.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much. And we also have an executive director from the BC Bereavement Helpline here with today, and she's going to be sharing some of her own lived experience. But she's also running a pet loss support group that I found out. And I just want to give her a little moment to also share that. So Pam, are you here? And can you speak on the group that's about to launch?
Yes, thank you, Joshua, and thank you, Jennifer, for sharing everything that you did. And Joshua, I have to say it was validating hearing you say that you got emotional during that, because I did. As much as you want to think that you'll be good during sessions like this, something somebody says can bring back certain memories. So thank you both. I'm going on 1 week from today, it'll be a year since I lost my guy, Scrappy. He was the second dog that I had lost, but he was definitely the inspiration behind BCBH launching a pet loss support group in combination with the people who've been calling our helpline. So this year, from January to July, we saw the same number of calls come through as all of last year for people reaching out looking for pet loss support. So, of course, that combined with my own personal loss, I started to think, there's got to be something we can do. I thought back to after I lost Scrappy, I had reached out for support, coming from a background where we provide support groups. I thought, what? Why don't I look for a pet loss support group? I was in the Okanagan at the time. Unfortunately, I was unable to find anything that was going on, even online during that time. So I did feel very, very alone. It's the disenfranchised loss that, you anticipate, yet when it comes, you're never ready for it, even though you can prepare for, 10, 15 years. And so, yes, as a few of you have noted in the chat, we are really excited to be launching this in November, our pet loss support group. It will be virtual, starting November 9th from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we do require registration, but it is considered drop-in. The reason that we're doing registration is just so we have an idea of how many people will be attending the groups. This being new, we don't know if we need to do breakout rooms or how we're going to do that. So I do encourage all of you to share that if you know of anybody who would be interested in joining. We have the link that's shared there again, and I do have posters as well. If anybody has, in-person space where you'd like to put that up, we can share that as well. Yeah, I'm not too sure how in depth you'd want me to go, Joshua.
I think that's good. I think it's just raising awareness
Nice.
of the support. So thank you for sharing. And so we're just really excited that there are at least two organizations within BC that have taken this on, where like 4 years ago, no one was even doing it. So it's just really, encouraging for me as an outsider, realizing the narrative is changing. So I want to thank you both and both the organizations for doing what you're doing. So we're going to pivot now to our discussion with people with lived experience. So thank you, Andrew, Elizabeth, Hector, and Pam for being here with us today. I'd like to start asking each of you just basically to tell us a little bit about the animal or animals that you're honoring here today that have died. And where did you get your support during your grief journey? And so, Hector, I'd like to begin with you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, well, as you guys mentioned, especially Jen, that she mentioned like the criers, that probably none of us are criers. I want to remark that I considered myself that I was, or I'm not a crier person, but probably just cried these last 6 months after losing Cocoa more than in my entire life. So yeah, it was really tough, but I could say that it's like having an open wound. I looked for help. I didn't find what I was looking for. I knocked on doors or send emails, and eventually Jen looked for my email, as she mentioned. I'm living in North Vancouver, so I'm not from there. And she make an exception. She opened her agenda and give me the opportunity to help, and I really appreciate that. She attend my open wound at that time, and yeah, it was really helpful for me at that time. I start doing something in order to feel better, but she guided me to do things more significant. And she helped me to understand that all the things that she have described in her presentation, and tell me that do things that help me to feel better and to feel like or make sense to me. I tattooed my little girl here on my arm. I started writing a book, and she encouraged me. Jen encouraged me to keep doing it. I ended up writing 220 pages, and yeah, it helped me a lot to overcome this, or well, I don't know if I could say overcome, or just to manage that feelings. And yeah, I wrote this story as well, trying to help myself, my family, but also I would like to share it when we'll be ready. I would love to share with more people with the same situation.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for like really expanding on all the different things that you're utilizing. And said it's always, I don't know, it must be great for Jennifer to hear. I know it's great for me to hear that you had that support when you reached out. There was someone. It's so isolating, so devastating when there's just no one there when you're trying to reach out. And so I'm really happy you found someone. And you said like you did a lot of work to try to find that person. So I'm glad someone
Sure.
answered the call.
I wanted to say as well that she was not the first person that I talked to. And the first time, I didn't feel that I was helped. I just felt that someone was covering some work, and it didn't help. So I kept looking. So when I get to Jen, she really helped me. So I really understand that, and she really makes me feel better. So if you don't find the right answer, or if you don't find the right person, keep looking. Yeah, you may find the better way to deal with this hard process.
And I see some people posting some of their own losses and who they're honoring here today. So yeah, so if people want to, if they're here today and the audience that are want to honor their deceased pets, feel free to post that in the chat too, and we'll honor them as we speak further. So next, I'll bring Elizabeth to speak.
Sure. I'm Elizabeth. I'm Hector's wife. So we both lost Coco. Sorry, I get very emotional. Well, but I really like Hector found Jen. And when I wanted to talk to Jen, she asked me to do it separately because my grief is different than his. And so I also talked to Jen. She also helped me a lot on the process. And one of the things it was very important to me was that I told her, I don't want to accept it. I just don't. And she said, you don't have to accept it as an approval, right? You are not approving what happened. You just have to accept it that is the way it happened. And try to just continue with your life. And well, despite that I'm crying today, it has been 6 months and I think I'm much better now. Sometimes I just get very emotional. But yeah, like it has helped me a lot. And the fact that Hector is writing the book, it also has helped because we share stories about our dog. And then he remembers things in a way, and I remember them in another way. So we have chats about what really happened and how do we want to put it in the book. We did well. He wrote the book in English because our kids only know how to read in English. So we thought the book was for them also to read. So it has been a difficult time for sure. Coco was our first baby, but going through this with Jen and Hector's book really has helped me to deal with what happened.
Wow, I didn't actually know you guys were together. So, surprised, but I think it's really beautiful, as you sort of said, you grieve differently, but yet it's very beautiful to have each other through the process to remember and say we have different memories. And I think that's fascinating, and the beauty of talking to people who knew your animal to sort of hear what they remember, because you're like, oh, I forgot that, or whatnot. So I think that's such a beautiful way of remembering and getting that type of support. Is there any other places you found support along the way, Elizabeth?
Uh, well, we also went to a grieve like virtual thing, but we didn't really found what we were looking for. I must say that I get panic attacks at night. Not anymore, but at the beginning I was getting every night panic attacks. So, and I get a lot of anxiety. So I also got some help, just natural things to help me to calm down while I was grieving, right? The panic attacks is just the grieving process as well. So that also helped me just to be more calm and just be able to go through it.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. And so next is Andrew is here.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this, and especially thanks to Jennifer and the Chilliwack Hospice Society for this wonderful opportunity. Losing a pet for me is at least as difficult as losing a person. And the grieving never stops. I remember learning just a little bit about the various stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about. And I remember looking at the so-called last stage, acceptance, and thinking, well, it's a tidy little package. Once I get to acceptance, I'll be done with it. And I was wrong. The various stages come and go, but they never really go away. I'm still actually grieving the loss of a pet, my childhood pet, that died in 1985. That's quite a while ago. So anyways, attending this group, especially as a man, because most of the people are women, it so happens, was a real privilege and a benefit to me, because I took the chance of being vulnerable, setting aside the hyper masculine teachings of childhood about not feeling and being strong and all that kind of stuff, and actually talking about my pain that I still carry with me. So it was really nice to share the vulnerability and to hear other people's stories of loss, and to be able to identify with their pain, and to achieve some sense of I guess it's ongoing, but it's kind of a sense of closure, even though it's not fully closed. Hard to explain that one. But it was really cool at the end when we made those little jars full of colored layers of sand. I took some fur of another dog that died, I guess, 9 years ago. She was very dear to me. Kept some of her fur. And I took just a little bit of that fur and I put it in the middle of the sand jar. It now sits in our living room, and it's very beautifully decorated. And it's a reminder and a tribute to what a wonderful companion she was, and how she enriched our lives while we knew her. Anyways, grieving the loss of a pet is very difficult. And having been trained to be a man, I'm actually choking back tears right now. So that's about all I have to say, and thanks again for letting me participate in this. This is great.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for sharing. And you're right, I'm still you know, hold back tears a lot. But sometimes it just happens and you can't. I'm not that strong anymore. But I think it's so important to be able to have moments to be able to undo some of the training that we had within our culture, to be able to feel like it's okay and it's safe to express those emotions. And I'm getting better at that, but I'm still learning just like you are. So that's great that you pointed that out. And so Pam, oh yes,
Sorry,
Jennifer.
Josh, if I could jump in there and just add that the value of letting it all hang out there, you know, and as the staff person who, you know, helped to facilitate the groups, I cried in these pet death grief groups. I just let it all hang out, and it was so useful. And I got feedback from people who participated that it was just like, well, you know, that's good to know that you still cry. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, we're never done grieving. And so feeling free to cry, and as men, feeling secure enough to cry, and that knowing that we were able to create a space for Andrew to be in a room full of women, very strong women, and the vulnerability that he let himself experience was incredible, you know. So yeah, I commend you for doing it. So thank you.
And then lastly, we have Pam, if you want to come back on and speak to any kind of supports that you've had that you found was helpful.
I would definitely just say, you know, finding people who you can talk to, who just are there to listen and not judge. You know, it's often pet owners. It's been nice to find those people that, without judgment, you can release all the feelings that you're going through. I will say though, because I struggled finding support, and being somebody who lives alone, that's really what inspires me though, to then find ways to help others. Scrappy was my support for, you know, 15 years. And as Jennifer had mentioned, you know, that's what dogs often are, pets are to a person. And so to have that support taken away and not have a replacement, you know, that's the most difficult part. There will never be another replacement. I mean, of course, people right away do say, you know, get another dog. That will help you. And for me, I actually think it would do the opposite. You know, my dog, he was more than a dog, of course. You know, he was family to me, my only family here. And he was also my brother's. My brother had passed away 16 years ago. And then he only had him for half a year, and I inherited Scrappy. So, you know, it's the secondary losses too that are tied to the pet loss that come as well. You know, I'm reliving then the death of my brother, the attachment to Scrappy. But yeah, I mean, it's really tough finding those supports. And so to listen to all of you who have found supports, I'm envious, but also very happy for you. So, you know, I'm hoping that this meeting will inspire that many more people to create supports in their communities. It'll be great to see that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and I hope so too. And I think that's why we're doing this, just to increase, hopefully, supports in how people approach people who are grieving the death of a pet. And so we have some time, so if anyone has any questions for any of the people with lived experience, feel free to raise your Zoom hand or put in the chat. I know Tulsa, I believe you had your hand up when Hector was speaking. I don't know if you wanted to share that question.
Did you mean Tula or Tulsa?
Tula. Yeah, was it you?
Thank you, everyone, so much. I don't have a question so much as, yeah, you've really inspired us to go ahead and start our pet loss grief support group here at Salt Spring Hospice. So thank you for this presentation. And we lost our family pet a year ago, and I can relate to all of your amazing stories. I was not prepared for the depth of grief I experienced in losing this dog that was in our lives for 19 years. And I agree, the people that I reached out to were all pet owners, and I knew that instinctively they would be the only people that could really understand what I was going through. And I think you spoke on it briefly earlier, Jennifer, but you know, when we have to euthanize our pets at the end of their lives because of illness, that adds, to me, that added a whole other component of making a decision for another sentient being. And that is something that I found really hard grappling with after the fact. You know, the guilt, maybe you spoke to it in that respect, Jennifer, is the guilt we feel after that. That's all I wanted to say, and thank you so much. And it is a profound thing, and it's much needed in our communities for people to be able to come somewhere and speak amongst themselves with each other about this kind of loss, because it's really profound. And until I lost my own pet, I could not have offered support to someone else the way I can now. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And then there was it someone in the chat? I believe it was Anna. Oh, Elizabeth, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Just trying to unmute myself there. So I wanted to start by simply saying how privileged I feel to be part of this and to have witnessed what many of the people said during this. I decided to join this because I facilitate seniors groups, and I have had to learn and come into the understanding of what the loss of a pet can mean to people. I did not grow up as a pet person, and I have had the guilt of feeling like, well, I'm just, you know, helping this person who has lost their spouse of 50 years. And here's this other person who's telling me they've lost their cat or their dog. And I could not reconcile those two. And I have had to, through simply witnessing the depth of the grief that people have in losing a pet. And today has been really helpful for me in being able to really take that in. I feel quite emotional about that. And so I just really wanted to acknowledge how important it is, not just for people who own pets, but for everybody to get a sense of loss is loss, grief is grief. We can't compete with it. In terms of whether it's a person or another sentient being. And so I just wanted to make that comment. And thank you so much for bringing this forward. I'm just so thankful that I took this presentation in.
Well, thank you, Anna, so much for being vulnerable to say that. And I think that's important to realize it is a challenge for some of us to be able to see that. But it's nice how you saw that was through witnessing the lived experience of people. And I think that's an important lesson, and why I think we have structured this as we have done, because it's not just educational, but people with lived experience are sharing from their hearts. And I really appreciate the power of that. And sometimes I would say it's more powerful than the educational component. No offense, Jennifer, but my personal opinion. And so Elizabeth, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, now that I'm feeling better, I just want to say that really everyone grieves differently, and that you have to, I have had a lot of people telling me how they grieve and what should I do, right? So everyone is different, and as you can see, Hector and I, the same pet, we live together, we grieve differently. So don't let anyone tell you how to grieve or what to do. Just go into your own journey and learn how you're grieving and how to make it better for you in your own way. That's the only thing.
I like that. That's powerful truth. And last question we have is Stephanie, or comment.
Just a comment. I lost 5 pets in 2 months between May 17th and July 22nd. They're all seniors and they're all bonded, and they just died one after another. And I'm obviously still grieving, as you can hear me crying, but I looked everywhere for supports and there wasn't a lot of support. But some things that I have found helpful, if someone is on social media, there's a lot of pet loss support groups on Facebook, and people talk about how hard it is for them and how they cope. And it's very validating for me because I talk to people and they don't see it as equivalent as a human loss. And so talking to other pet owners has been really helpful. And on Instagram, there's also a few pet loss psychologists, and that information has really brought me comfort. So if anyone's looking for some kind of comfort that they can find without leaving home, I strongly recommend those resources.
That's great, thank you. And it's amazing how new technology and platforms can actually help people with and give them support even through Instagram or Facebook. And I think that's amazing. So feel free, Stephanie, to put those in the chat, and we'll put those into the show notes. And so we have to close up the session, but I want to keep talking. I want to keep listening, but we can't. And so I just want to thank everyone who presented today and made comments and opened and shared within the chat. Really opened your hearts to us all and others to be able to learn today about what it means to go through and feel the death of a pet, and to lose someone that has been so monumental in their life. It's not easy, and I said, like, it's hard to hear, but I'm really encouraged by today about the supports that are coming within BC and that have happened so far. And so we hope you all enjoyed the session too, and we ask that you complete a short survey. And the link will be in the chat. We'll also be emailing it to you if you have to go. And then registration for the next session will be on children's grief, and that's scheduled for Thursday, October 19th at lunch, Pacific time. And so that will also be put in the chat, I believe, too. And so to be notified of any other sessions in the series or the action plan, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. And our aim is to provide you with a copy of the presentation, recordings, any kind of summary notes to you within the next 7 workdays. So please watch your email for any of this information from the center itself in the echo sessions. So just thank you again for attending. We really appreciate, and we're hopeful that like more and more people are going to continue to hear about this series so we can really better support those around us as we all move through our own losses and encounter bereaved people in our life. So thank you, and we really appreciate you coming today. And thank you again to all the presenters.